There's two sides to every coin. Then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks. And some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fists at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I have a meltdown, breakdown, shakedown. 'Cause this is my hometown, so back down, sports clown. It's all just a game, and it's the last down, let down, cowtown. I said it's all just a game. I give the touchdown, the rundown, the lowdown. 'Cause it's over the game. Gonna crack down, and shut down, the sundown. I said it's all just a game.
Hi, kids. Happy Friday to you. It feels like we just started September, and now we're rounding the corner pretty quick into October. Glad you could join us. I am me. Jack is over there. Jack, things that I'm thinking about while we're on the air. When are you going to get a camera? When are you going to turn a camera around so that people can see you? That would be the next evolution. Because, of course, you're now becoming a far more important cog in this wheel.
Yeah, I've become an interior decorator in here.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the camera's got to come soon.
It's soon because, of course, we encourage people to leave comments because you'll curate them and go through them and ask them later on in the program. So at some point, if you don't mind setting up a camera for yourself so that you can now take partial responsibility for this.
Sounds good.
You can't just all be on me. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Lots to talk about. Very excited about our guest today. He is a favorite of mine. I will get into that. Don't ever feel like he got a fair shake here. And I say that, and it was under the watch of a guy that I have a lot of admiration for, respect for, and a friendship with, and that's Brad Treliving, but we'll get into it. Sven Baertschi, recently retiring from the National Hockey League. He played for Calgary, Vancouver, and if I don't mention this, somebody will go, what about that one game with the Yes, he played one game with the Vegas Golden Knights too. So he did. We're going to talk to Sven about hockey, life after hockey, about hockey, and about his time in Calgary. A reminder that this is an inclusive program. Everybody is welcome here. I am going to refrain from going too far off on the deep end about idiots, donkeys, and tin hat brigades. What they did on Wednesday, using children as an excuse as a shield is just disgusting. So, again, you're welcome here. This is a place for all. Broadcasting live from Treaty 7 territory as well. Make that mention. A lot going on as we have now gone from captain skates into golf tournament, into Penticton tournament, and now into day 2 of training camp. That is right across the National Hockey League. But of course, we focus here locally with the local hockey heroes. Day 1 was somewhat newsworthy. And Jack asked me before, was I surprised about the news about Oliver Kylington? Surprised, but I don't think I'm shocked. He missed the entire year last year. I think he has been very upfront about it. He's spoken to the media about his struggles with mental health. And I'm not suggesting for a second that that's what this is. But I would suggest that I am going to give Oliver and the team a wide berth and let him do what he needs to do to get ready to come back. Let the team do what they need to do to welcome him back. So no Oliver Kylington to start camp. That changes a little bit of the equation in the mix on the blue line. Not a little bit, it does. It changes the equation in the mix on the blue line rather significantly. This is a team that stayed fairly quiet in the offseason, although it did sign Jordan Osterley as, as depth. It has Dennis Gilbert. both of which have plenty of NHL experience now and can be inserted into the lineup. But what you don't have is what we all wonder what we were watching 2 years ago with Oliver Kylington. Was it the emergence of a gifted, offensive, reliable defensively defenseman that others would covet? Not saying he was going to be an all-star, not saying he was going to be a Norris Trophy candidate, but I think he was that guy that you go from being that extra piece, that 6th, 7th, 8th swingman to, geez, his contract might make him very attractive to people. He was drafted in the 2nd round with some baggage. The Flames felt that he fell to them. He could skate like the wind, played a lot of pro hockey even before he was drafted in Sweden. Maybe it's taken a long time for him to emerge. Maybe it hasn't. That's a personal judgment I suppose we can all make. But I think 2 years ago, we were watching a young man that could offensively produce in this league and was much better defensively in this league, was capable of utilizing his speed and skill to make up for mistakes. And while that sounds like a backhanded compliment, it's not a backhanded compliment. There's a lot of guys that can't make up their mistakes. Oliver Kylington can, and that's a great gift. So my only hope is that he's getting what he needs and he's in a place where he's going to be comfortable and fine and happy. That's all you can ever ask. So that being said, this sounds like me critiquing my former peers, my current peers, however you want to say, the Calgary media. I just felt there were 2 tracks yesterday. I felt there was the track coming in. What about Lindholm? What about Backlund? What about this guy? And then what I saw was a very happy Ryan Huska. And I know a lot of people were saying the vibe is different. All right, the vibe is different. I do know this. That is one of the happiest coaches I've ever seen on a day 1 of a training camp. I've seen other coaches that use day 1s as opportunities to send messages, as the time to, call out and set the tone, I guess, for lack of a better term. If Huska set a tone yesterday, it's for enthusiasm and wanting to be at the rink. And I don't think there's a single thing wrong with that. I like it. I am not critical of it. I'm all on board. We saw some of the combinations. Huberdeau and Lindholm seem to be a pairing. Sarangovic is I think skating on the right side right now. We've seen Ruzicka moved up on the depth chart. All of these are day 1 observations. Markstrom, who really hasn't been much of a story, heading in. He's got a contract, so nobody really seemed to be too worried about him. Markstrom talked quite candidly about his struggles last year, and bouncing back. And these are all the things you want to hear day 1, but they're day 1 things. The games start this weekend with the ridiculous, doubleheader against Seattle. I don't know. I don't see the value in it, but that's neither here nor there. And I would anticipate we are hopefully going to break away from this log jam of storylines. It's been Jack and I talked about this. I don't want to go to captain's skates and talk to these players. What are we going to talk to them about? Now we got to talk to them at the golf tournament. Now it's day 1 of training camp and it's contracts. And hey, I'm not dismissing it. I'm not saying they aren't important. They are. They're everything. I get it. It's a salary cap league. But two lockouts, well, more than that, but the 2 lockouts that I've covered, they always, and I know 2012, 13 seems like a million miles away, and 2004, 2005 seems like a million miles away. But it's a business. It's a business. So I'm not going to begrudge players from holding cards close to their vest. I'm not going to begrudge players for not doing handstands and giving local discounts. Some do, some don't. The one thing that I would suggest is if you are living in a bubble, if the Calgary Flames are the only team you're paying attention to, then take heed and take heart that players on expiring contracts tend to be carrying the day in all markets. Toronto, William Nylander, Winnipeg, they're all fired up about, the futures of Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuck. Vancouver, Elias Peterson, what's his next contract going to look like? The one that if you told me, if you said, Rob, of all of the contracts out there, all the players on expiring contracts, which is the safest to get done and move forward and won't be any controversy? Honest to God, I would have said Tampa Bay and Steven Stamkos. I would have said it. But now it's maybe the one of all of these expiring contracts in the league that has gotten the most attention because of what he means to that organization, the success that he's had in that organization, and the fact that he's still very productive in his 30s. But then, you know what? Then the reality of the situation kicks in and you go, oh, hold on. Who's the GM there? That's right. Julien Brisebois. If you look at the way the Tampa Bay Lightning do business, they don't do business like the media thinks they should, like fans think they should, and quite honestly, like 31 other teams in the league do business. They don't. They ride and ride and ride a horse, and then when they figure they're done with it, they move on. Andre Plot, Alex Killorn. I mean, Blake Coleman wasn't there very long, but he was an intricate part of their third line, very important, moved on. They moved on from Ben Bishop. They moved on, from lots of players. Stamkos had, and I think he knows that, and that maybe informs why he said what he said. And as thanks, Jack, as he put up Greg Wyshynski, there's the quote from Greg Wyshynski. To be honest, I've been disappointed in the lack of talk in that regard. It was something that I expressed at the end of last year that I wanted to get something done before training camp started. There haven't been any conversations, Stamkos said on Wednesday. Brisebois spoke to the media and he said, no, nothing's been done. I almost think that that's by design from Stamkos. I don't think he accidentally made those statements. I think he knows what the history of the general manager is. I think he wants to stay in Tampa. And now he's getting the feeling that, Tampa's going to do what Tampa does. And they'll disconnect themselves from him. They've won 2 cups. They've been to 4 with Stamkos. Accolades. But if there is a single entity in the National Hockey League that should remind us this is a business first, it's the Tampa Bay Lightning. It's not to say they're mean and difficult. And I think everybody wants to play for John Cooper. I think everybody wants to be in that organization. But the reality is, for those of you my age, there's a little bit of Logan's Run going on there. There's a little bit of, you get to a certain part and it's over. I'll let all the kids Google Logan's Run and they'll understand exactly. Jack, do you know about Logan's Run?
I do not know about Logan's Run.
Okay, so I'll let you Google it and it'll all make sense. Okay. But there's a little Logan's Run going on there. You get to a certain point and it's over. So watch that one with interest. It would be really, really odd to see Steven Stamkos in another jersey. It's been done before. We saw it with Jerome here. It's not unprecedented. And I think it's headed that way. But I think that's why Stamkos said what he said, is he would really like to stay. He'd like to be the oddity in the Brisebois administration. He'd like to be the guy that sticks around and defies the way they've done business. But to do that, he's going to have to be creative. They're going to have to be creative in the way they negotiate that contract. And again, who does business like the Tampa Bay Lightning? I mean, look at the ridiculous amount they paid last year to Nashville for ostensibly what's a third line forward and, physical guy, character, heart and soul guy. But they gave up the farm because that's exactly what they wanted. That's how they do business. couple other things, not to do with potential UFAs, but RFAs. Interesting in Anaheim, Trevor Zegras, Jamie Drysdale, 2 RFAs without deals. The little ball of hate, Pat Verbeek, as a general manager, has already, and he's done the job for a couple years now, since replacing Murray. Already has the reputation as a tough negotiator. Already has a reputation of being a guy that, spends it like it's his own. And I would guess, considering the wealth of draft picks and young prospects that the Anaheim Ducks have in their system because of their poor play the last couple of years, this has less to do with Zegras and Drysdale and more to do with how do you manage the players coming? What's the long-term implications of these deals? Which I point again to 0405, 12-13. That's why we had lockouts. This is the business of hockey. I'm very, very curious this year what Anaheim, San Jose are going to look like. I wouldn't want to bet on either one of them in terms of an over-under on wins. But I also believe that the general managers who are both in their first terms, Mike Greer in San Jose and Pat Verbeek in Anaheim, have visions and are determined to get things done. I mean, look at Mike Greer grinded and grinded and grinded on that Erik Karlsson deal, grinded on that deal. And I know there's lots of, the beauty of hockey is, there's no shortage of people who assign letter grades to the deals that have been done. And I know that, it wasn't a home run in a lot of, but Greer grinded to get that deal done with Erik Karlsson. And then I mentioned Nylander. Okay. Yeah. Those are the things I wanted to do. I want to go back to the Flames for a second. I found this is a little bit of an oddity yesterday. On sports. It was, again, I was looking at Flames news that was coming out, and it was all the same, it's not a knock against the reporting here. It's the same storylines. We knew what the storylines were, except one. And this one appeared on Sportsnet, courtesy of James Madge. And it's not actual original reporting because he just basically took a interview that Nikita Zadorov did with a very famous Russian YouTuber. And I found the story to be spectacularly fascinating, but it really hasn't got much of a run. Jack and I were talking about, he heard about it, so it's out there. But it's basically Zadorov admitting that the Russian NHL players all got together with the intent of hopefully coming up with a joint statement in protest of the war with Ukraine. When that war broke out, it elicited a lot of emotions. And I know for a fact, people connected to the Ukraine would call the Calgary Flames and ask them why they were having Russian players. Ovechkin is persona non grata to some fans, to some media people, because of his direct connection to Putin. The fact that he shares photos of Putin on his social media, that he's, is a confidant, friend, whatever you want to say. For some, Alexander Ovechkin doesn't matter anymore. Zadorov, who lives in Miami in the off season, was very candid in this conversation. It didn't. The idea of getting the Russian players together, there he goes. So he did speak to the local as well, but so he can't go back to Russia after what he said. He knows that. He's going to stay in Florida. So my apologies to suggest that nobody in Calgary was covering the story. That's not what I meant. What I meant was the story on Sportsnet was written based on the YouTube interview. And in that interview, Zadorov was talking quite candidly about his frustrations with the players in the NHL, the Russian players in the NHL, not being able to come together, not being able to agree on the proper wording. But it felt like that should have been a bigger story, that it felt like that should have got a bigger play. It felt to me like in a league which has often been criticized, rightfully so, and has been criticized in these quarters for not standing up at the right time, not taking social issues seriously. Here you had this story that a player alluded to. Like, it's very, very difficult for a player to live over here and not feel connected. I mean, the the Flyer prospect that the NHL told the contract on, he was sent to Northern Siberia for a year, didn't play hockey for a year. There have been repercussions to athletes in Russia for speaking out or doing things that the government doesn't feel are appropriate. And Zadorov admitting yesterday that, he can't go home. Say what you will, Miami, Moscow, Miami. We all have a home. We all came from somewhere. There's connections there. And Zadorov admits that. It's frustrating for him that he won't be able to do that. I like that story. I like that it got reported. I like it that I saw the day, but I really appreciate Zadorov being as candid as he was. Curious to see if there is another shoe to drop in this, if there is more to come from this hitting the light of day, that the Russian NHL players were at least talking about standing up as a united front. Flames and Seattle on Sunday. Hitmen open up their regular season tonight at home against the Medicine Hat Tigers. The Western Hockey League season is underway. A couple of other local stories worth keeping your eye on. 2:00 tomorrow afternoon at McMahon Stadium, the Alouettes are in town. The 6-7 Alouettes taking on the 4-9 Calgary Stampeders. I would leave it and defer it to Danny Austin, live from the 55. He is, he's been very active on social. It's, and I don't know if it's the record of the Stampeders, but it's a little bit depressing this year. The whole issue of statistics and the fact that the CFL cannot get out of its own way in that regard is embarrassing. We continue to watch attendance numbers, and they continue to struggle even here in Calgary greatly. Just not, and half of it has to do, I'm sure, with the fact that the team is struggling. I think a lot of it still has to do with this crop of Stampeders is not known in the community the way previous Stamps have been known. I don't know if there's that affinity for this particular group. Not winning and, is not acceptable around here. All of those things go into this. Danny Austin's point is a valid one. It's near impossible for this team to be a playoff team this year. They have not strung 2 wins together, and yet to make the playoffs, they're going to have to win 5 in a row. A lot has to happen. Beauty of sports, and the reason I love sports, and I think the reason you love sports, is any given Sunday. And in this case, any given Saturday. You'd like to think that anything can happen, that surprises can happen, that this team can rise up. The injuries are absolutely staggering and should be absolutely taken into consideration. Not only the sheer number, I believe it was 16 players on injured reserve, but the quality, the caliber of those players. But some would say those are excuses. Next man up. There's always something in the world of sport that can address the situation, and next man up. So the Stampeders play host to the Alouettes tomorrow. Note the start time, 2:00. After that game, Hamilton plays in Toronto. Usually the East plays first and then the West. 2 games tonight, Saskatchewan and Ottawa, BC and Edmonton. So really the path for the Stampeders would involve the 3-10 Ottawa Red Blacks beating the 6-7 Saskatchewan Roughriders. And then the BC Lions, who I believe have shut out the Eskimos. No, sorry, my bad. The Elks. 2 games already this year. So both of those are plausible. And then I suppose Calgary beating Montreal is plausible. You'd like to see the team at least play meaningful games, keep their hopes alive. Meanwhile, in the CPL, the Cavalry are on the road in York. The Cavalry, 13 wins, 7 draws, 5 losses, 46 points, sit across, just right across the top of the table. They're 6 points better of their nearest competition. I almost say this religiously every week about them. This is incredible considering their start. This is the hottest team in sports in this nation in many ways right now, across any measurement. I guess the Argonauts would be the counter to that. But Marco Carducci, their tender, and Tommy Wheeldon Jr., their manager, the veterans on this team really got them firing on all cylinders. Attendance has been good. There was some attendance numbers. They're not necessarily tops in average in the league, but they're really close, and that's exciting. I'm excited to see people support the CPL and support the Cavalry. We do have women's professional soccer coming next year. That bodes well. And then finally, before we get to our guest here in a couple of moments, over on the Major League Baseball side, somehow, some way, the Toronto Blue Jays are still in this. It seems like every time you're not paying attention, you look up the scoreboard, they might be losing. They lost again last night in New York, 5-3 to the Yankees. They're in Tampa Bay, which has been an absolute house of horrors historically for the Jays, but they're in a playoff spot. So Toronto continues to get mammoth pitching. But, what we thought 3 or 4 years ago when we were having these ridiculous conversations about, Vladdy Guerrero Jr. being a sure bet Hall of Famer. Do you remember that conversation? He was leading the league in home runs and other statistics, and we were talking about the Hall of Fame in his second or third full year in the majors. And here we are a couple years later. He's a very good ball player. He is a very good ball player, but he doesn't appear to be a generational ball player. He appears to be a very good ball player. The Jays right now, I don't know. I got to be honest with you. I don't trust them to win a short series. A lot of people in baseball point to the pitching and say they'll be okay if they make it to the postseason. This team and its inability to score runs when they need it, but more importantly, the amount of stranded runners this year. It's not a recipe for success. Not a recipe for success. We were really honored last week. We were out in Vancouver and hosting an event for Heroes Hockey and then the Superheroes program. And the guest was a guy that I've known for a long time, and that it was Sven Baertschi, and that's what's going to lead us to him joining the program today. And Sven and I had a wonderful conversation. He was the Flames' first pick, 13th overall back in 2011. You might have heard on this very podcast, Ryan Pike a couple of weeks ago, and I discussing that draft. That draft was really good for Calgary. Bärtschi in the second round was Marcus Granlund and Tyler Wotherspoon, Johnny Gaudreau, and Laurent Brossoit. All of them played some measure in the National Hockey League. Wotherspoon obviously the least. Granlund not very long. Bärtschi, I think people forget, he had a longer career than you think. He played almost 300 games, the bulk of those in Vancouver. And then Brossoit continues to be a serviceable backup in won a Stanley Cup last year with Vegas. Just one of those oddities of a draft in which almost all of your players you picked that year play in the NHL. That very rarely happens. But I remember Sven Baertschi, specifically coming from Portland, was a incredible point producer. And it was just a breath of fresh air, and had a chance to spend some time getting to know him in training camp. And last week in Vancouver, I actually brought my notebook back from the 2011-12 series and we went through the notes from that conversation, because it was really one of my favorite conversations that I've ever had with a young player. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. Really disappointed with how he was handled in Calgary. Really, really disappointed how he was handled in Calgary. That's my version of it. Just, happy that he went to Vancouver, happy that he showed that he could play and be really productive in the NHL. I knew he could. I've said this before, like what really pissed me off about that whole thing was they make the trade, they trade him to Vancouver, and 2 months later they're going, well, we have no skill on the wing. Yeah, but you had skill on the wing, didn't you? But that's the way the game is played sometimes. Indeed, a pleasure for us to bring in our next guest. Brought to you by Ski Sellers Snowboard, skisellersnowboard.com. 76 years in Calgary. 2 locations open right now. McLeod Trail by Chinook Center, Bow Ridge Road Northwest. And again, it's the same. Where do you want to buy your equipment? Where do you want to buy your stuff? You want to buy your stuff from people who use it, people who are out there, people who are snowboarding and skiing. You want people who have experience selling you the products. And that's exactly what you get at Ski Seller Snowboard, skisellersnowboard.com. A pleasure for us to welcome the aforementioned Sven Baertschi from his home in the Pacific Northwest. Sven,
Yep.
how are you today?
Good. Busy with the kids.
Yeah. Is
doing
that
stuff.
is that what
Daddy-
is that what
Dad's home now, so he's busy.
I was going to say? Full-time
Love-
dad, right?
Loving it.
Are you?
It's been amazing. A little different. Don't have to get up and go to work right away. I can get up, feed him breakfast, get him ready to go and for the day. And it's been a pleasure, really.
When is the last time you weren't attending a major camp?
That was so obviously like the camp that I had was back in September, actually August or late August. Pro Camp Switzerland, Bern, and that was it. I got hurt in February, and that's kind of been it. Ever since then, it's definitely a different feel.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of get to that. You get to September, you get to August, and you get that feel like you have to get ready for a camp, but then you don't. And yeah, so it's been different. Took a couple of weeks to kind of get over that fact that you don't have to do that anymore, and then you just kind of move on and do all the stuff you kind of miss out on.
Was stepping away, was retiring a difficult decision for you to make?
Yeah, I think it's been a build up.
Mm-hmm.
I pretty much retired 2 hours before I had to fly to back to Bern.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think, of course, yeah, it is difficult. It's a weird situation. I think the way I kind of looked at it was, a certain part of my brain just kind of turned off, and because that's all I ever knew, right?
Yep.
Like all I ever knew was hockey, and ever since I was 4, and then you get to that point where you're just kind of done,
Mm-hmm.
But the greatest thing is reaching out to different people, reaching out to some of the guys that kind of went through similar situations and kind of talking to them, and they helped me out big time. Some ex-teammates and that kind of guided me through like the next few weeks, and I'm already on to the next chapter, so it kind of happened quick. So I'm super excited what's next, and but yeah, it's different. You're not a player anymore. You become something else, really.
Do you leave the game healthy?
I think so. Well, there's quite some. There was some injuries I was going through that kind of carried on throughout my career, and it took a lot of maintenance to take care of that stuff. And I don't know if you leave the game healthy most of the time. I think it's just maintaining your body to be able to play, and it just to me, it became a chore for each game. It became a lot of maintenance just to get ready for practice. It became a lot of maintenance to just be ready for a game, and that's why I came to that decision. And right now, just kind of feel my body slowly like recovering from all that, from all these injuries, and yeah. So I think that's the biggest thing. I don't know, like, you know, you play the game for that long. I think, you know, you're gonna have your stuff. You know, you're gonna have your injuries and stuff that can carry on for a long time. But right now, it's just kind of happy with the way I feel, and I feel like my body's recovering pretty good.
Do you still love the game?
Love it.
Good.
Never gonna leave the game. I don't think it's too like engraved in me, and yeah, I'm already on to the next chapter. You know, like I'm already been working with the Winterhawks and kind of doing some stuff there. Mike Johnson, unbelievable coach. He kind of took me in already working with them, just working on little details, working on little skill stuff and all that stuff. And so it's been, you know, not going to, as a player, I'm okay to leave the game, but as we move forward, I think I want to be more of a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of my thing right now, is what I'm kind of being mentored by one of the, you know, greatest coaches in WHL. So I'm lucky.
Coaching or skill development? I mean, there's so many opportunities now. Which is what interests you as a teacher?
I'm not sure. You know, like, well, you got to start somewhere. Like, you got to start at. I'm lucky enough. Mike gave me a call and brought me in right away, and it's been my first week. So I'm just getting to know some of the players. I'm getting to know what's happening out there on the ice. A lot of similarity. Like, he hasn't really changed his way. Mm-hmm. So like, a lot of the things we're doing each day is the same. But just having the opportunity to go in and work with him and just kind of being mentored by him and see what coaches do day by day. That's my biggest priority right now. It's just kind of getting to know what it's like to be in the coach's room, what it's like to be, you know, like studying like all the video and all that stuff. And yeah, so it's just kind of been shadowing him, seeing what he's doing on a daily basis with the young kids, and then stepping in after practice, working with some of the younger kids. And yeah, it's a different angle to the game, and I'm actually enjoying it, but it's also, you know, I'm seeking advice from different people that I used to play with. You know, I called Brock Besser, I called Mike Camilleri that I used to play with, because some of the things they do or used to do, or, you know, that stick out to me, I'm trying to figure out exactly like how they used to play the game. And, you know, Mike was his shot was unbelievable. So like I literally just reached out to him and was like, hey, like, what is it that made your shot that much bigger than that much better than anybody else's?
Yep.
So I'm like, I'm learning the game from a different angle.
Your experience in the NHL and your experience working with different coaches, how much is that going to impact you? How much does that form the coach that you're about to become? Who are you stealing from, and who are you trying to avoid being?
I think you just kind of pick and choose, right? Like I think there's great lessons, you know, and I think for me, we've talked about this before, and I think one of the things, you know, Bob and I never got along in Calgary.
Yep.
Like, it was just one of those things where, or maybe we got along in like a different way, whatever. But one of the biggest things he like taught me was to always stop at the net. And I pretty much made a living stop at the net.
Right.
There's other things that kind of came with the whole thing, and like, I don't think he treated me great in a lot of ways and all that stuff. But those are like little things you kind of learn from and kind of help you down the line. And, you know, I had Bob, I had Travis, who kind of brought me to Vancouver. It's little stuff you kind of learn along the way. And like, you know, a lot of times I think as a player, it might be tough at the moment to hear some of the stuff, but I think you're also going to learn a lot from it and move on. And that's where I'm at right now, is kind of, you know, really I didn't enjoy having Bob as a coach, but at the same time, I'm like, well, how many goals did I score in front of that? Because I stopped. So it's an interesting thing. It's, you know, I think coaches, and that's kind of what I'm learning right now, is like it can be tough love. It can be tough at times for like younger players, but at the end of the day, I think a lot of times it's just trying to help in some way. Obviously, it's got to be in like in a good way, but
right.
It was the same with Travis. You know, Travis kind of, you know, I think Travis was always like a father figure to me, and he kind of took me in, and it was tough love, but it was in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
And then somehow we ended up together again. We had some great seasons together, and but yeah, it was, you know, he expected a lot. That's kind of what I'm seeing right now with being in the coach's office is a lot different than the locker room.
Yeah.
You know, the kind of, what I noticed with Mike, you know, I think he, you know, there's a lot of, he's really trying to understand the players and how much can he give that guy, how much can he give that guy, and like how much love does that guy need, and how much toughness does that guy need.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to see that view, you know, from a coach's side. So it's been really interesting for me.
How much, or do you pay attention to the Mike Babcock's situation, or even here, you know, with the controversy that was around the Calgary Flames last year, Bill Peters, the way that it seems like, you know, the accountability to coaching and the way that you can deal with players or should deal with players has changed. And I would say it kind of changed in your time while you were in the NHL. Do you see it that way? Is that your feeling too, that, you know, you can't coach exactly the same way you could 10, 20, 30 years ago?
I don't think you can, like, yeah. I think that's, why would you coach like that? Like, what's the point, you know? Like, it doesn't make sense. It's, to me, like, to me personally, but I know nobody, like, it doesn't make sense to coach that way.
Right.
You know, like it just doesn't. I think what you want to do is encourage guys to do the right thing. And, you know, like I understand the whole toughness and all that stuff. And like, you got to, but yeah, like seeing some of the stories, seeing some of that stuff, I understand hockey's a rough sport. Hockey's, you know, it's supposed to be played a certain way and all that, but doesn't make sense. It's not necessary to do some of this stuff. Like, really not. There's different ways you can do it. But like I said, again, like I'm not Mike Babcock, and, you know, like it doesn't make sense, you know, especially like it's a different vibe now. And I can tell, you know, being in the locker room now, but it never made sense before either. You know, like you know, I played with some of the toughest people, you know, Brian McGrattan, Gillies, absolute machines and beasts, but it never made sense for some of the stuff that was happening around.
Right.
locker rooms.
Yep.
Or behind closed doors and within the game. And it just, yeah, I don't know. Once I saw it, I kind of was like, I was actually surprised because, you know, obviously like on the outside, you kind of see like the news and all that, but what's happening behind closed doors is kind of, you don't really hear about it until you do. And then you kind of like, not really smart, I don't think.
Yeah. And the reason for the question is because if somebody's about to embark on a coaching, you know, journey of your own, these are new. It's a new world. Like, I think it's becoming a new world, right?
I think so. And I think, well, you know, you look at Cooper in Tampa.
Yep.
He, you know, he kind of went in, was like, when they won the second cup, he was like, well, I didn't really do that much. I just always encouraged the guys.
Right.
That was his biggest thing. But it is an interest, like it. Why wouldn't it make sense for guys to be like understand like tough love, and you got to push guys. I understand that part, but there's always going to be that part where each player is different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of what I'm learning right now, is where some guys need to be pushed harder. Other guys, you know, like you have to have a feel for each guy. And I think the biggest thing, you know, like working with Mike right now is learning how to deal with each player and how to get the best out of your team. And I think a lot of times it's got to be some firmness there, but I think there's got to be some love as well, and some, you know, guidance and helpfulness. And that's kind of what I'm learning right now. But I've also learned a ton through, you know, Bob, which ended up helping me down the road. So I'm trying to kind of brainstorm and kind of get some of the stuff out of each coach that I had, and that's kind of what's happening in my head right now. And
yeah,
you kind of open up a whole can of worms in my head right now, to be honest.
Well, kind of what I'm hoping to do.
Yeah.
Let me come at it from a completely different way, and this is not your issue. This is my issue. I have been. We were lucky in this city. We had Carla McLeod coaching the University of Calgary Dinos, and she also coached Team Bärtschi, and TSN and the world allowed us to watch her coach, and her methodology and what we saw was incredible. And I just was asking the question, you know, are we ready now for, you know, can we finally just have a woman coach a hockey team, like a men's hockey team? And what we've learned is we're willing to give second chances to guys who've had reputations, but Carla's got to prove that she can coach men. As a player, are you ready? Could you have played for a woman on the bench?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it doesn't really, like, at the end of the day, it's kind of like you want to trust whoever is behind the bench. You want to trust the knowledge, and it doesn't really matter who that person is.
Right.
You know, but when you get into a locker room, you kind of, as a player, you kind of want to have that feel, and you sit there, you want to have that feel of they know exactly what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's the biggest thing. And it doesn't, like, at that point, it doesn't really matter, like, who is standing there, but like there's got to be a trust between coaches and the player, you know. And so whoever can teach you the best and guide you along the best, at that point, like, it really doesn't matter who it is.
Right.
You know? But like you have that sense when you sit there, and let's say before a game or whatever, you have that sense that the person ahead of you that's standing there and like talking to you through a pre-scout or whatever, once you have that feel that, okay, they know what they're talking about, and to guide you in the right direction to get a win. That's only thing that matters.
Right.
Like nothing else really, like then nothing else. And I think, I mean, there's so many amazing coaches out there that never have that chance to get onto like the next level or whatever. And it's, you know, it's like, I think too, like there's so many good women out there that play amazing hockey, move on to the next chapter. And I think it's slowly coming.
Yep.
Getting more women involved in hockey, and like, you know, it's got to move forward, I think. And it like at the end of the day, like to me, I think it doesn't really matter who it is that's standing in front of you, as long as there's an authority and knowledge, and then you're going to learn, and you're going to become a better player. And yeah.
I mentioned before you got on that last week when we were in Vancouver, I brought in my notebook, and I was going back to one of our first conversations at Flames Camp with you. And I want to revisit part of that conversation because I never got to ask you the complete question last week. When I talked to you as an 18-year-old, it was an interesting time because Mark Streit had just been named a captain in the NHL. Nino Niederreiter, who you played with, was making a splash. Swiss hockey was a thing. It was really coming on. You just played in Bern last year. What did you notice when you went home? What did you notice about the game in Switzerland? How had it grown, or did it change?
It's it's the way I look. Well, obviously you got the big guys, so you add a few feet, and the ice actually becomes a lot bigger each way. Olympic ice. It's really a North American game on the big ice, which is sometimes kind of hard to explain, because I think guys play hard. It's a physical game, but it's hard for defensemen and stuff to kind of keep that to play hard, because guys got a little more room. The team I played on, we had a strong team, a fast team, and we sort of played the North American way for most of the year. But what I've seen is, there's tons of guys over there that are unbelievable hockey players, really skilled hockey players, fast hockey players. A lot of skill. A fun game to play. You obviously, you got a couple more seconds when you're out there. But yeah, for me, I loved it. I enjoyed it. For me, it was always the goal to go back and play at home. And but yeah, it was definitely different. And for me personally, I kind of thought it was going to be easier than it was going to be.
Okay.
But yeah, I enjoyed it. Like, really, my goal was to go home and be in front of my family and give them a year of fun and have them at each game. So that was my biggest goal, and we had a good team. Just didn't make it quite all the way to where we wanted to go, but yeah, travel was easy. Like we didn't really have to travel that far, and central Switzerland, so simple travel. It was good. Got to see most of Switzerland, and then yeah, but it was really for my family.
Yeah,
I think that was the biggest thing. Just grind out a year and be home with the family.
I'm old enough to remember, when Switzerland and Germany seemed to be the team that was always switching, from A pool down to B pool and back, or regulated and all that. What's the expectation for hockey in Switzerland internationally? I mean, is the expectation at the World Championships, at the Olympics, it's to compete now, right? Like, do they feel that way?
I think so. Well, ever since they got the silver,
Yeah.
Ever since then it has become, well, it's, it's different. Like, like you talking Olympics and then you talking like World Championships.
Yeah.
Two different things, right? Like
Right.
you
That's
can
true.
have a Team Canada, Team USA, whatever, with everybody missing pretty much. But each year I think it's been, I think a lot of the teams in Europe, you look at Finland, you look at Sweden, you look at Switzerland, it's become really competitive at the top away from Canada and the US,
Mm-hmm.
in that way. But again, it's different. It's the World Championships. It's not Olympics with a fully stacked team. It's a different story. But those are big events, big moments for Team Switzerland going in each year. And what I've seen, like the past 10 years, the development that's been going on, and like some of the players that, like I said, when I first broke into the league, there was like nobody.
Yeah.
There's no Swiss representation throughout the league, and then all of a sudden, like this, you got. I was talking to Travis Green, who Devils assistant coach now. He told me, he's like, "Oh, we got 4 Swiss guys on our team," and that's kind of what it was like for me when I was in Calgary.
Yeah.
We had Jonas Hill, like we had a full Swiss team, and then Vancouver, we had Yannick Weber, Lucas Biza, and like it's, so that's the coolest part, I think, is that the guys make a step in Switzerland, they play well there in juniors, get drafted, make it over here, and then they kind of spread throughout the league, and that's the biggest thing. So like, I don't know what it is right now, but it's got to be at least 12, 13 guys in the league.
Yeah.
So I'm super proud of that. And
impact guys.
Yeah. Big
right?
time with Timo signed in Jersey, and, you got captain Nico Hischier. That's awesome to see. It all started with Mark Streit, and kind of moved on to Lucas Biza and Nino, and then I kind of broke into the league, and that's awesome to see. And I think that it speaks for Swiss hockey.
222 games, 110 points. Tell me about your time as a Canuck. What did you take away? What did you enjoy about being in Vancouver?
Lots of stuff. I mean, awesome place to live. Really loved living there. Team was good. I think we just kind of we were developing, and we're just getting going, and we kind of in that rebuild situation, but we're young, we're skilled, and we had a good team. I think there was a lot more possible than we did. But yeah, best part was, living there and enjoying the time there. I think, it's an absolute beautiful city.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I had my best years there. I really enjoyed playing there, and great teammates, great line mates, and yeah, I know we missed the playoffs pretty much every year, but still loved it. It was a great place to play. It was fun to play there, and yeah, I wish we would have had more success, but that is what it is. Like they had some success after once I left, but it was a lot more possible, I think.
13th overall, first round pick, 2011. You go to the Calgary Flames. It's funny, when I promoted that you were coming on, immediately we got, I remember the kid and the 18-year-old. And you and I talked about this last week, but I do want to revisit it a little bit. Tell tell me about coming to Calgary. Tell me about your first pro training camp, what it was like, and you know what it meant to you to be at an NHL training camp.
Well, I don't really know how to explain that, because it was never supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of those weird, you know. I mean, I took a risk coming over to Portland, and I just kind of hoped and guessed, and let's see how it goes. Kind of trust my agent, and you'll be fine. It's gonna be good.
You didn't speak English when you came over, right?
I did not. Yeah, I did not. So when I went to Portland, I didn't speak English, and I kind of just took a gamble on, you know, how it's going to go like the next few years. And I just kind of trusted people around me, and they encouraged me to go. And, but then, yeah, then I found success in Portland, and then I think it kind of turned from a dream into like reality within like the first half year, where all of a sudden, you know, like you see yourself on like the mock drafts and all that stuff, and like you expected to go first round, and then you kind of it becomes reality, and then you go to the combine, you get drafted, and all of a sudden you get your first NHL camp, and you kind of, yeah, you know, it becomes the dream. And then like you sit next to certain people, you practice next to people you never thought you're going to practice with and then play with. And it was definitely an interesting experience, and something I never thought of was going to happen. But then it did, and that great support within the team throughout camp. You know, because it doesn't mean much, like being a first round pick, really.
Nope.
There's so much more to it. You know, you're talking to guys like Jerome again, like you're talking to, they established themselves, and then you just kind of come in with like nothing really. And so they kind of guide you along, and like the guys in Calgary back then, they did an awesome job, loved them. They just kind of help you along. And, you know, I was talking about Mike Camilleri, like he, you know, used to drive me around and help me out with everything I needed kind of early on when I got there. And that's kind of the environment that Brent back then kind of built. And I loved it, you know, but it was obviously you're nervous. Obviously you're going through all that stuff, but at the same time, you want to come in and show yourself and make a statement, make sure you're showing yourself off. And so, yeah, personally, I love that. But obviously you got some nerves. You're a young kid. We're playing with men, so but I loved it.
Let's talk about what happened in that first season, which was you qualified to be an emergency recall because of the injury situation in Calgary. And certainly I don't think it was anything that was on your radar, but you ended up playing in 5 games that year.
Yeah, I did. Ended up being a phone call. I think we were in Kamloops, and there was a phone call at like 6 a.m. And I had to go to the rink, and I thought I was traded. And then they were like, well, you got to go. You got to catch a plane. You're going to be playing against Winnipeg. And it was the first time for Winnipeg to be back in Calgary back then.
Yep.
And, they, sent me on a plane, and I went there, and I was, of course, nervous. Sat next to Jerome. He kind of calmed me down. Kind of. I still shaking about the whole game. Went in the first shift, and it was awesome. You know, it was a great experience. Thought I was just going to go in for one game, ended up staying for 5. Scored in my second game in Minnesota where I got drafted. So that was a great experience.
Yeah, we'll talk about that goal though.
And then I went 2 in a row after that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it was weird because it was kind of like the dream come true, and then also got sent back right away after because they got some back. So it was kind of like the first kind of memory of playing in the NHL and then going back to like reality, you know.
Yep.
Because I knew then I wasn't like an NHL player. I was, you know, lucky in some ways, and I kind of just went along with the whole thing, and I was playing on just purely adrenaline. And then, I went back and kind of reality kicked back in, and I was back with the Hawks and finished off that year pretty good.
Tell me about that first goal in Minnesota.
It was, I mean, it was one of those things like, you know, it was fairly like a simple goal, but like it's one of those things you're always going to remember. And it was a shot from the point. Derek Smith took a wrist shot. I was in front of the net, tipped it, went off the goalie's pads, and then the puck just kind of laid there. And I looked at the puck, and it had the NHL logo on it. And then it all went slow motion. I looked down and had an empty net to shoot at, pretty much. And in my head, I remember it was just like, this is it. And it was like that was like the it moment.
Sure.
Welcome to the league, you know. And you know, like the biggest thing is the excitement from the teammates when you score your first goal. It's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
Because they know, you know, like they're right there with you, and then you score, and it's just kind of, it's that moment you wait for like your whole life, you know.
Yep.
So yeah, that was awesome.
How much did that impact the next year? Was it helpful or was it a hindrance that you had those 5 games?
It's a great question. I think that's something I got to kind of study and look at. Like, you know, like expectations were high. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know that. And I think, you know, people kind of expected me to come in and be like putting up 30 but unless you're top 1 in the world, like you're not going to do that when you come in at 18, 19 years old.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of, there's some guys that can do it.
Oops.
Looks like his connection just dropped completely.
All right. All right.
Speaking of things, today is just one of those days where everything seems to go wrong.
I don't know what I have done to you, but I've done something, and I keep looking, and I'm turning something off, and then you fix it, and then something else gets turned off, and you fix it, and I will apologize to everybody right now. You know, we believe that the issue on the sound was on his end, but he was on a roll, and I just, after going through what we went through with Brett, I just didn't want to stop it. I'm hoping everybody's like me and can deal with a little bit of crackling to hear some. He's just so good. Like, he is just so good. You want to text him? And just,
yeah, I'll send him.
All right, I'll let him know.
Get him another link.
No, it's all good. It's a good time to remind you that all of our guests are brought to you by Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. 76 years, believe it or not, 76 years in Calgary and area. 2 locations. Now, there's 4 normally. two locations open right now, McLeod Trail by Chinook Center and Bow Ridge Road Northwest as well. The other two will open up here in the next little while. Beautiful weather this weekend, yes, but snow is coming. And if you've seen pictures from the high altitudes up in the mountains, there's snow falling. So it won't be that long before snowboarding and skiing and snow skating. Don't forget about snow skating. You can check that out as well. Those things are coming. So hopefully we'll get our guests back, but just a good time for us to remind our friends at Ski Cellar Snowboard that they're a huge part of what we do each and every day. I'll wait for your cue because not yet. Okay. All right. Oh, I see him. Should we try it?
Yeah.
All right. Sven, hopefully we've got you back here. Can you hear us?
I'm here. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Perfect. No, it's no problem.
Gotcha.
I'll just reset the question. And that was, did the 5 games in your first year impact you the next year in a good or a bad way?
I don't know. I probably wouldn't have an answer for that. I think obviously like expectations and stuff were high when I came back, and probably looking back was not great for me to score those goals. Because obviously you come in afterwards and, like he's supposed to be the go-to guy.
Yeah.
Year after, and it never kind of worked out that way for me. But also there's so many different things that changed and happened within like the organization and like
absolutely
what was going to be next. And
yep.
And so I don't know, like it's one of those things where looking back, I look back at it and, it was not great, not a good, even though I loved it, it's one of those things like I loved and enjoyed, but setting me up, like I kind of set myself up for, a 30, 40 goal a year, because that's kind of the expectations people have, right?
Yep.
Like it's,
even
though like I said before, like at that point, I was not like an NHL player. I didn't know how to play the game. I just kind of came along, and the biggest thing was, Brent Sutter, before the first game, pretty much just telling me like, hey, just go have fun.
Right.
But there's so much more to the game where, like, I wasn't playing well defensively. I wasn't doing like some of the details guys are doing each game. I just was lucky enough to get the puck on my stick a few times and score.
Yeah.
But then that's kind of like the expectation. But then, you come to camp the next year, and there's so much more to the game. So I don't know if it was a good thing or bad. Like I really don't have an answer for that right now for you. But tell you what, loved it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I get that part. Let me run another theory by you. And I'm not saying I'm culpable, but I'm wondering about my peer group, because for a long time there, the Flames just never had great draft picks and never had impact young players. And it seemed like everybody else had impact players. And there was you, Michael Backlund, it just seemed like we were almost wishing and hoping to cover young players having success like other teams were having. Did you feel that there was a lot of pressure coming back in that second season from the media and the fans to kind of be like other young players were at other places in the league, which is somewhat unfair because they're first overall picks and stuff, right?
Yeah, I was like, you get viewed a little different just because you get the tag on your back and you're a first round pick.
Yep.
Right. So in some ways, of course, you get a little bit more opportunity. And at the time I broke in with the Flames, it was kind of like there was a turnaround happening there. And I think like I loved it. And I think, some of the players that came in, they brought some great veteran guys in to help us out in many ways. But, me and Bax, like we've spent a lot of time together, and we kind of we're in the same boat in a lot of ways. Yeah, but you also can sense the feel of, okay, like this team is moving in like the right direction, I think. And yeah, so like me and him, TJ Brody was there. There was definitely like a big difference between like rookies or younger players and then, veteran guys.
Yeah.
But we were trending in like the right direction back then, going into like the second year. And yeah, I thought we had a great team. All played together well. I think the room was great, and yeah, I thought we had some decent success. But I think that year, my second year, I don't think we made the playoffs. Trying to think back.
No, not in not
Yeah,
in 13-14.
yeah, but it was definitely different going in. Playing with I think Sean Monty was drafted that year, and playing with him and Oodle, I thought I had some good success with them. And I think playing with Sean, I think he was one of the funnest players I played with, really.
What made him fun?
Well, the guy can barely skate, but he can shoot.
Okay, yeah, I get it.
No, it was fun though. We had a great group there.
Sure.
Could have had more success, I think. Yeah, I think that year I was going through some injuries and stuff as well. And but yeah, it was interesting because it kind of going into Calgary, and we're kind of in that regroup situation there. And then also once I got traded to Calgary, Vancouver, it's the same thing kind of there. Like they kind of they were in the swing of things, kind of getting new players in, and so I never really experienced like the full winning mentality, really, in some ways. Just trying to make it to the playoffs, both with Calgary and Vancouver.
I'll skip ahead and come back for a second. Just on that note, you did get in a game with Vegas. You were in their system. Did you notice a difference around in that regard? Because that's an organization that just won, that right from day one was in a Stanley Cup final. Was it a different experience in that organization?
Interesting. That's actually a hard question. There was some sense of they just know they're great. And that's kind of what I noticed in Vegas in general. Like not just the Knights, but also the Henderson. Like, in both ways, it's like there's a certain standard there where it's almost based, it's because they made it to the cup right away. It was like the mentality of, okay, we're going to win this thing next 4 years, 5 years, whatever. And a certain standard, a certain I don't know, it just kind of felt right, like the year before. before they won the cup, when I played one game, there was no, you can sense it like in the room. There's no doubt. Either we're going to win this year or next year.
Right. And an inevitability. They just were destined.
There was a certain vibe there.
Yep.
And that's all I can really say. Like it just felt, and not like as soon as they went into the season this year, when I was in Switzerland, I was like, gosh, like they're just too good.
Yeah.
And they know they're good.
Yeah.
And each game was, if they lost, didn't matter.
Yeah. Because
they knew they were good. Going into the next game, they're going to win. And that's kind of what it felt like. When I watched the games in the final, Florida, like, didn't have a chance.
No.
I mean, game, was it game 6 or game 5? That's kind of like the mentality I always had in Vegas, and that's kind of what I saw there. And yeah, interesting. Like they just knew they were going to win. They knew they had a good team, but it just, you felt it in the room,
Double back to the Calgary. Just one last one on Calgary. And I've always wanted to ask you this, and I think you've established the relationship with Bob Hartley. I don't have a role in this other than I was really deeply disappointed this happened. The trade to Vancouver, was that disappointing for you, or was that a new lease on life for you?
No, I was happy. I was really happy with that. And I think, like I was talking before about like tough love and all that. Like I understand that being part of hockey, and like you got to be rough, or not rough, but tough for your players and all that. But at the end of the day, like it was like too much for me to handle at that time. And it was, like I said before, though, there's many things I learned from him, but I also got, kind of beaten up in a lot of ways mentally by him. And it's one of those things I kind of look back and like I learned a lot from him, but he was also not, I don't think he had a good feel for what I was like as a player.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm always looking back at that time in Calgary, where it was probably too much for me to handle. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, right? Like I don't know, like it's one of those weird things where so much I learned from him, but God, like he beat me up pretty good, like mentally, and I had a rough time with it. In the long run, like, is that going to help me or not? It's kind of like trying to figure that out. It's going to take a while, like there's definitely some lessons in there, some good stuff. But I mean, guys would kind of look at me at times, be like, how much can he handle? How much more can he go through with him? Because I think, like I'm a Swiss person. I'm a sensitive guy. I'm not that rough and tough. That's who I am. And I think he just kind of had that idea where he was going to teach me some lessons and like let me know. But then also he taught me like some of the best stuff that I've learned. And, he's had success everywhere he's went. But also it was tough. There was there was a lot of tears, a lot of emotions, a lot of tough nights, no sleep. Yeah, but really, there's some good, some bad, some ugly, and that's kind of the way I kind of look back at it. Yeah, but we didn't have that many great conversations, really.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Let's end on something more positive, and that's a connection that you and I share through Heroes Hockey. Tell me about Kevin Hodgson and meeting Kevin for the first time. How did that all happen?
Well, I went to rookie camp in July. My first camp in the NHL. The funny part was, so I went to camp, and it was one of those things because I was training in Switzerland. There's no ice throughout the summer, right? So I go to camp, and so go on the first practice, and all these guys are flying around me, and I'm supposed to be like the first round pick, right? So I'm supposed to be like the best player out there, kind of. And well, I'm not doing that well. Barely skate. Didn't skate all summer. And so like in my head, I'm like, well, I gotta stay out. You know, I gotta skate. I gotta do some work afterwards and make sure I'm ready for the next day. Craig Conroy, he was like, first practice, he was like, what's going on with you? And I told him, I was like, well, I haven't skated. He's like, the hell you mean you haven't skated? I'm like, there's no ice in Switzerland, like in the summer. You know? And so like I made the decision, I'm like, I'm just gonna stay out in the ice and skate and do my own stuff, and like after practice or whatever. So I get out, and Zamboni driver is kind of at the door, like, hey, like, can you pull this guy off? And I see Kev over there, and he's just kind of at the bench, like, kind of gave me that, can you get off? And yeah, I went on for like half an hour, 45 minutes just by myself, and they didn't pull me off. They didn't do anything. I think Craig was talking to the Zamboni driver. He's like, just let him skate. Like, he hasn't, you know, like, so let him know. And Kevin's just on the bench, just like, hey, like, what the hell? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, like, we got to get this guy off. We got to get him off. And yeah, so it's just every day I would just stay out there because I have to catch up on some of the skating stuff and skill stuff that I wasn't able to do in Switzerland because obviously didn't have ice. So every day, you know, for a week and a half, Kev was standing at the bench and let me know, it's like, time to get off, time to get off, time to get off. And I would just stay and stay and stay. And yeah, that's kind of how we started our relationship. And I think I've always had great relationships with people that work for the team, people that work, you know, do the long hours. And I know how hard it is for training camp and all that stuff. So like, always make sure that I would chat with him, you know, hang out with him, have a good conversation with him. And yeah, it's one of those things, you know, like you meet each other twice in life, and he's been a great inspiration for me. And I was a pain in the butt for him at the beginning, but now we're great friends, and we're helping out each other right now. So it's great.
You are indeed. Listen, last week it was so awesome to see you and your family. So awesome to talk to you again today. Thank you for doing this. You know, I've always been your biggest fan. I think you're a great human being and a hell of a hockey player. So good luck. I hope we can stay in touch. I'm fascinated to see where the coaching takes you. And my other piece of advice is continue to hit them long and straight down the fairway.
I'm going in about an hour.
Are you? Okay. I'm not surprised. Sven, thanks for doing this, pal.
No, thank you. I love you. I appreciate you. And thanks for everything you do, and always happy to chat with you. So whatever you need, I got
All
you.
right.
Got you. Okay.
Love you too, brother. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk soon.
You too.
Sven Baertschi, our guest, brought to you by Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. 76 years in Calgary. 2 locations open right now. McLeod Trail by Chinook Center, Bow Ridge Northwest. I know Jack and I, we talked about it. I apologize for the audio quality. We believe it was on the other end. We don't know. But it's certainly, I apologize to Jack for this because that was a hell of an interview. And I know for some people it's going to drive them nuts because of the crackling, but I hope if you can just bear with it, it was worth it.
I'll re-upload it. I'll try and fix some of the audio issues and re-upload it. So we'll see what we
some
can
good
do.
stuff in there.
Yeah, it was really, really good.
Really good
I
stuff.
love that.
You want to get to some comments?
Yeah, we do have some comments.
Or questions or whatever? Okay.
First one here. I'll start with some Canadian football. So there's news that the USFL and the XFL might merge.
Correct.
Do you think the CFL kind of goes back and revisits that conversation or no?
Oh, I think that ship sailed. I think the opportunity was there. And I know that you can call it protectionism, you can call it xenophobia, you can call it whatever you want. There's an old guard, and then unfortunately there's just not a big enough new guard. And, Dwayne Johnson has a connection to this league. I think he was genuine in the conversations, but I found it really disappointing that when this happened, I think it was 2 years ago, that it was shouted down by all quarters. And again, without knowing what was being done, I don't think 2 spring leagues, and I think there's another spring league, is there not? I can't keep track, but
I think this year it was just the XFL and the USFL.
Okay, so it's just those 2 spring leagues. It only makes sense. Football's never had the true minor league system. It doesn't really need it with college. So having them merge, no, failing a major collapse of the CFL and it going away and then them expanding into CFL markets, no, I don't think so.
Can you explain how you and Sven became so close?
So Sven, I'm going to, but I'll jump a little bit ahead. Sven was I was at the draft in 2011 in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and got to know him. We interviewed him. We had him on the radio, but he's a different guy. Like he remembers you. He cares about you the wrong way, but he took an interest, and then he came to rookie camp, and I remember going to rookie camp, and I think, Johnny was there, and Mitch Wall was there. There was all kinds of things, and again, Sven kind of remember. It was only a little bit a month before, and I remember you from the draft, and then training camp came about, and that was my first year on television, and I started keeping books. So I was so used to taking recordings and for the radio, and everything was recording. So I taught myself to take versions of shorthand. So I took notes everywhere, and here it is. I just remember sitting with him in the hallway and talking to him one-on-one for about 15 minutes. And he was offering up stuff. Pavel Bure was his favorite player growing up. He talked about wanting to play in the Olympics. His brother and father played, but he lived with his mother. So he was from a single family. And he then, went back to Portland, and it was my first year on Sportsnet. And it was Brent's last year here. And I really like Brent, and I like the coaching staff, but the team was, just kind of perennial behind the 8 ball, always kind of on the outside looking in. And then they got into all these injuries, and Sven came up, and he scored 3 goals in a row. And I remember there was a little bit of made up controversy about how the Flames recalled him, because you're not really supposed to recall 18-year-olds, but under emergency circumstances you can. And he scored in 3 straight games. And it's kind of what I talked about with him, Jack. At that time, Flames just did not have a lot of prospects, just did not have a lot of success. They had Michael Backlund, not much else. TJ Brody, not much else. And then here was this, and you're always hearing about it, right? Like there was always articles written about how badly they drafted, and you're always, how they didn't develop young players and they didn't draft skill. And I hate to say this, but like, everybody always brings up Matt Pelech. Like they selected Matt Pelech in the first round, and who was Matt Pelech and why? And, Michael Backlund was this, seen as this, this pick that might turn into something. And then Sven Baertschi got there and he scored in 3 straight games. And I think people got really excited about it. And it was something for me, like, not that I'm anything, but, you get connected to certain things. And to me, I look back at, the highlights of my television career really are, my first ever game on Flames pay-per-view was in Nashville, and Jerome scored a hat trick to win it 5-3. Sven's 3 goals in 3 games. And I would have to say Mika Kiprasov's, final game against Anaheim at home. Those were it. Those were lean times, though, so for me, we always kept in touch. But Kevin Hodgson, who I brought up, is the executive director of Heroes. Sven, and I'll talk a little bit more of this in a bit, but Sven was a day one adopter of Heroes, and here in Calgary, and then went to Vancouver and did it in Vancouver. So, through Kevin and through Heroes, we've always stayed in. And I just, you're not supposed to, like, you're supposed to be devoid of, and I would say Backlund, Conroy, Bärtschi, Leland Irving. There was a handful of guys that I just migrated to, and in the case of a couple of those guys, we've just always kind of stayed in contact. So hopefully that answers the question.
Do you think there's too much pressure on young players coming into the league to play right away and make an impact, whether it's the NHL, NFL, all professional sports?
Yeah, I do. Eric Nystrom was always a good guy to talk to. Eric Nystrom was a former first round pick, but I believe under Craig Button's regime. And it seemed to take forever for Eric to get to the NHL. And we would have those conversations, and it becomes an anchor. Like, it really becomes hard. Oh, a first round bust, or you were selected in the top 5, or, analytics has really done this amazing job of making all of these tiers and all of these little segments. Well, if you're, you got X amount of percentages, if you come out of here, you got X amount of percentage. So, I think, especially with the new, and it's all financial. It is far cheaper to have young players on your roster, far more economical to have young players on your roster. You look at the NFL, they've changed it a little bit, but you're looking to hopefully have early success with a quarterback, because if you have success with him, you're going to have to pay him. And that's the reality of the situation. The NBA is the same thing. And as a result, I think we miss more. I don't think Sven Baertschi was developed correctly. And that's why I asked the question if the 5 games and the 3 goals hurt his development, because I think they did. Because I think guys like me he's coming to camp. He scored 3 goals last year. He's a 19-year-old this year for sure. And part of that was because Calgary just never happened. It happened in the 80s with Nieuwendyk and, Fleury and Vernon, and there were all these guys. But, so rarely were, all due respect. And again, another favorite of mine is David Moss. But, David Moss was a late round pick that kind of came up in the middle of the season, and, and I hate to say this, but became are you a 20-goal scorer? Did you score 20 goals? Because David Moss scored 20 goals, right? I think we rush. I think we spend way too much time rushing. And I've said this recently, like, what a complete disaster I was at 18 as a human being. I was in a trade school at 18 and I was a disaster. I can't imagine money and, and the road and celebrityism and all that stuff. It's overwhelming. I think, and I'm guilty of it too. Like Dustin Wolf, right? Dustin Wolf's been a pro for what, 2 years? And here we're all like, my God, they haven't traded Vladar yet. But if he doesn't play, if he's in the American Hockey League, my lip will fall down and, this is terrible. Right.
What do you make of Ruzicka skating in the top 6 here at the start of camp?
I like it from this standpoint. That's where you should be, kid. That's where you should be. He came up last year. First 10 games were good, produced points, and then just never to be heard from again. Didn't get off the bench, didn't earn the coach's favor. It's early in camp. We do not need to see what the lines are going to look like in November, in September. Put him in that position. It's a teaching thing. It's a coaching thing. If you say, Adam, you are playing with this, you're playing with Kadri and Dubé, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where we think you should be. It's up to you to stay there, right? What I hate is, not hate's the wrong word. I don't like Pelche with Rooney and Walker Dewar because that's not where he projects to be. But if not him, then who, right? I suppose Ruzicka. I suppose that's where you swap it out. You'd have to move sides too, wouldn't you, on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but, maybe the messaging to Pelche is, it's what we're talking about, Sven Baertschi. Sure, you played last year, but this is where you're going to start, elevate your game. And for Ruzicka, who, when he was drafted, it was flashes. It was lacks consistency. Tools, but lacks consistency. When I saw him in the American Hockey League, I always thought he was the product of Matt Phillips. I thought Matt Phillips made Ruzicka, and Ruzicka's numbers were incredible, and they were great. He proved to me last year, at least again in a flash, but not consistently, that he can play at this level. This is where we think you should be. Prove to us you can stay here. That's my interpretation of that move.
Last one. It is a prediction question, though.
Yeah. Oh, no. Okay. So, Jack, the prediction will be the opposite of what I say. Okay. That's how we're going to go on this.
Okay. So, yeah, like you mentioned, Rooney was kind of skating in that fourth line role. So people are speculating, is Coronado going to be on the opening night roster?
I still think he is. I think you only have X amount of spots. I think, there is something to be said about a kid like Coronado having to earn it. But Rob, you just said they put Ruzicka. Yeah, but Ruzicka's getting to that point about, either he's a player or he's not a player, right? So you treat them differently. I laughed my ass off after that game. We did the show on Monday, and I go home, and in my timeline, is it Robert Munich that works for us? Yeah. Oh, disappointed in Coronado. I expected to see more. And then the next one that came up on my timeline, Eric Francis, they've got to be happy with Coronado's play. He had, 1 goal or 4. It's like, all right, it's who and what you are. No, I still believe oh boy. So no, he won't make the opening roster is how I'll approach that. But yeah, I think he will be. I think so as well. All right.
We're done.
It. Thanks, buddy. And again, our apologies for the audio issues. It was a great interview, and I want to end today the final mile here. This really goes back to that question: why do you like, or why are you and Sven? So I mentioned that Sven worked with Heroes Hockey, and he was with Heroes Hockey in Vancouver, and in 2017. He was skating a lot with coming down to practice, and he got to know a young man named Kane. And Kane didn't really kind of fit in with the group, but Sven latched onto him and kind of took him under his wing. And as a Heroes Hockey player, he recognized something in him, and they had a bond. In 2017, Kane became very sick and went into the hospital in Vancouver. And he was in a coma for 3.5 months. And in those 3.5 months, his mom, Mark, who was the head coach of superheroes out there, and Doobie, who's another coach, those were the only 3 people. They took shifts, 24, shifts, so that 24-hour somebody was there. Sven was asking about him all the time. How's he doing? 3.5 months in, they had to make a very difficult decision with Kane. It was, do they continue to keep him in a coma and have things start to shut down, or do they take him off the medication and let him come out of the coma? Was it damaged? There was no right decision, but the decision was made to wake him up. They woke him up and they put him in, he put him, but he was transferred to sick kids. And Sven called and said, can I come down and see him? And Mark said, yeah. So Sven came down to the 6 kids. They got all the paperwork done. He was authorized. He came into the ward. Kane had just been woken up from the coma, was not moving. Obviously, 3.5 months, there's not a lot of muscle there. Sven brought in some swag, and one of the things he brought in was a little ball with the Vancouver Canucks logo on it. So Sven was talking to Kane, hoping that he would hear him, and he tossed the ball, and then Kane pushed the ball back to Sven. So Sven pushed the ball with Kane for 8 hours. Sven came back. Eventually, through this, it got to a point where Kane was then moving. I am happy to report that Kane is back and participating in Heroes. And this is, obviously 6 years ago now. But I really want people to understand that Sven, there's lots of good people in hockey. There's lots of good kids in sports, men, women, and everything. But in this particular case, I always believe that Sven went above and beyond. It's one thing to go and spend a couple minutes, but it's a completely different thing to go and spend 8 hours rolling a ball with a kid coming out of a coma. And I would have told that story with Sven on the line, but I know it's really emotional for Sven, and I didn't want to put him in an awkward position. So I wanted to share that story. So back to your question, the question you asked is why? Because of that. There's so many people that want to dog on Dougie Hamilton, and I guess I'm one of them. But I've also seen Dougie Hamilton around Heroes kids, and I've also seen Dougie Hamilton do things for kids. There's lots of stories like that, but I have a lot of time for Sven Baertschi, a lot of time. Apologize again for the lights. I don't even know. I've never seen that part before. What was going on there?
Okay, so I bought all these fancy batteries.
Yeah.
So we could get rid of some of these cords in here.
Yeah.
Turns out the batteries last 30 minutes. So
okay.
I had to plug everything back in.
Because it was like one would go out and then one would go out here, and then this one would go back and everything. And I'm like, what have I done?
It would go out, and then I go get the cord and plug it in. And then the next one would go out, and I did it again. And I think it happened like 3 or 4 times. So
you know what? If it was easy, everybody be doing it. That's what we'll go through. Have a great weekend, everybody. Coming up on Monday, Ryan Pike will be here. Lyle Peterman's going to join us. The AJHL showcases next week in town. Pike will give us a sense of the first couple of days in training camp. Remember, we're back with Wednesday shows starting October 4th. Peter Marr returns on October 4th. Eric Dahachuk returns on October 6th. Just to give you a little sense of the flow of things. Thanks again to Sven Baertschi for joining us, and thanks to you, Jack, again. Get that camera set up so you can be part of this, because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be able to do any of this. Have a great weekend, everybody.